background is I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I've been doing this for probably 15 years. I own clinics here where I live in Omaha, Nebraska. And luckily, thankfully, gratefully, I have very good staff that has been able to take care of a lot of the in-person people that we have. And so I've over the last 2 or 3 years really grown to love the online and kind of the global and it's a bigger world out there than just my 10 to 20 mile radius of people that I can help. The thing that I enjoy the most is helping people with mechanical, spine, so disc spine related injuries. So whether it's kind of like neck, shoulder, arm, back, hip, leg, and then helping them, safely not only heal but return to fitness, strength training, weightlifting. That's the thing that I enjoy the most. It's something that I find very beneficial for my life, and to be told, like Nick said, all too often that just don't do that anymore. Just stop and rest, and I guess you'll never be able to squat or deadlift ever again, is not true. It's all too often been told by usually it's practitioners that, in my opinion, are just lazy. They don't want to actually ask enough questions and dig deep enough and help you find the answers to get back to doing those things. So that's what we kind of wanted to cover today, was some facts and some assessment type tools for low back pain, whether it's just strictly mechanical low back pain or like what Nick was talking about, a sciatica type pain where you're having pain go down the leg. And it can be, like he said, it can be very debilitating. It is not fun. It's nothing that you're doing on purpose or not anything wrong. It just happens. I mean, the fact that I think I put down on that sheet, Nick, that probably 60 to 80% of everyone in the U.S. will have mechanical back pain at some time in their life. I think it's actually probably a little bit higher than that. I can't think of anybody that I know that at some point in their life hasn't had some form of back pain. It just is very common. So yeah, thank Charlie and Khalid for being with us. And do these guys have any questions? I mean, is anybody having any pain right now, or what would you like to learn?
I have a question.
Yep.
So sometimes this doesn't happen all the time, but when I do go for squatting, my knees they do have some kind of discomfort. So it'll go away like as I'm squatting, but it's always before that it starts to hurt. I don't know if that's like normal or anything
Okay,
like
that's a
that.
good question. So both knees or one knee, Khalid?
Both.
And so when you're saying when you're cold, when you're first kind of starting out, the
Yeah.
warm up type phase, you get some pain in the knee. Now, where is it, on the top of like near the quad tendon? Is it kind of below the knee, like in the patellar tendon area? Is it to the inside, the outside? Where do you feel it?
I think the inside.
Inside of the knee. Okay.
Hmm.
So once you kind of get that warmed up and moving, that pain does go away.
Yeah.
Anything else that would turn that on, whether you're walking,
Uh,
stairs,
if
does it have to be with weight?
no, if I stand up for too long, I also like if I'm like standing up for too long, it does start to hurt again.
Okay. Is it so during the squat, is it more when your knee, like when you're first starting out and your knees are straight, or is it during the, like, say, the descent when you're coming down at the
It,
bottom when it's loaded, or when you're come back up, or all phases?
like the quarter of going down. So like as I'm going down, but when I get all the way down, it goes away. But as I get up, it'll come back.
Okay. That's very good. That's very good information. How long has this been going on?
I'd say probably half a year.
Ooh, okay. So is it getting any better or worse over the last 6 months?
It doesn't happen all the time. It happens maybe like once a week, twice, or once every 2 weeks. It
Okay,
doesn't
so
happen a
there's
lot.
a key piece of information, and that's kind of some of the questions that we would ask even when we're dealing with. Now, this is a knee, which is still part of the joint of the body that we get a lot of injuries and pain in. But you really want to know, like, obviously how long someone's had something. The reason for that is you can start to differentiate between, is it something that's pretty acute, like if it's only been there like a week or so, like when Nick had his issue, it was pretty new. I mean, it would only been there for maybe what, 3 to 4 weeks. Nick,
Yeah,
when you were having that pain?
yeah, I think we got in contact, yeah, right around week 3.
Yeah. So that way you can really pretty much, rule a couple of other things out. Once you get past about week 6 to 8, so once you're past about 2, 3 months, then you're kind of thinking, well, it could be something that's still acute, like an acute injury, a tear, a stretch, a strain, something like that. And then it could be more like what's called a dysfunction or some kind of dysfunctional tendon or joint issue. Now, the key part for Khalid is that it's intermittent. So anytime the pain is intermittent, it comes and goes. It's not always there. That's the next question that I'd ask. How long have you had it? Constant or intermittent? When it's intermittent, that brings us back to that fact that it's going to be something mechanical. So kind of what I wanted to talk about even with the back stuff was mechanical versus chemical. A chemical pain, like if you, and we've probably done this, I mean, Nick, I know did, when you sprained your ankle and you tore or stretched some of those ligaments, that's a chemical pain right away because you've introduced an inflammatory response, and then it doesn't matter. It's constant. It doesn't matter whether you put your foot up, whatever you do, it's just that damn thing is just throbbing. That's a chemical pain. That's initial. Once that chemical sensation or pain kind of starts to come down, then you're left with that mechanical pain, which is certain positions, movements, activities, time of day, postures make the pain either get better or get worse. So like when, I'm guessing, Nick, once you had that ankle that you did there with rugby, right away, it was just constant swollen, throbbing. That's the chemical or inflammatory phase. Then it was, hey, if I prop it up and just leave it alone, it's not so bad. If I really load it pretty hard, dorsiflexion or really plantar flexion or like turn it in, invert it, then it gets really sore. So Khalid, if it's not happening all the time and it's just like, once every 2 weeks or so, and it's only on the beginning phase of that descent of the squat, it's probably something dysfunctional, just the way the tendons or the ligaments around that inside of the knee, something has just kind of been injured when it happened, say 6 months ago. And then as it healed, those fibers just didn't quite heal down quite right. And so when you get the right angles and the right loads, you feel it. But as you warm up and you start moving those tendons and those ligaments and all those kind of things, then it goes away. So what we'd have to do there is probably just work on some eccentric or negative loading with that squat, or find a couple of movements for you that turn that pain on. That might be something like a leg extension machine where you can kind of start it with it straight and then slowly let it come down negative to put bend on that knee under a little bit of load. It could be like a split squat, like a Bulgarian with that rear leg elevated. And so you're getting a little bit of eccentric load over top of the inside of those knees. Have you tried any of those?
I haven't. So do you want me to do it like before every squat session or multiple times a week?
That one we would do multiple times a week. That's a great question. So if we can identify the load, the angle, the exercise that kind of turns it on a little bit, then I would keep doing that. Turn it on to about maybe a 4, maybe 5 out of 10 pain, as long as, like with your squats, as long as when I stop and I get off that exercise or I get off that machine, it goes away very quickly, then you're fine. I just keep doing that. And you may have to slowly increase the load over time to get it to come to that like 4 or 5 pain level. But eventually, then you'll be able to squat and it should not bother you.
All right, thank you.
So essentially, you're trying to just increase some like load tolerance on that joint or tendon.
Yep. Since we don't have a mechanism of injury where it's like, yeah, I twisted it, fell, something happened, it just kind of started. It's more than likely just a mechanical problem in the knee. With it being like 6 months plus, it's more than likely a dysfunctional issue. It still could be a joint issue inside there. We could do one of two things. We could either pick a direction, meaning like, well, the knee is easy because it basically bends and straightens. There's not a whole lot of variability with the knee. It's just get it all the way straight or get it all the way bent. But with yours, you notice that it doesn't happen all the time, and it's only with like kind of squatting with weight. So I would probably just pick some exercises, some movements that turn that pain on a little bit. Like I said, 4 to 5 out of 10, and just keep working into it on the negative or the eccentric, and then just recheck that after a week or two, and that should be a little better. I mean, if it's truly a dysfunctional tendon or piece of tissue in that knee, it's going to take another, say, 6 to 8 weeks to fully go away, because that's just physiology. We can't speed that up. It just takes a little bit of time for those to remodel. And Nick's feeling this right now. So when you've had that injury to the lower back, let's just say we go back to Nick's back with the disc injury. He had a little piece of that disc that was occupying space it didn't belong in, that was then irritating a nerve root. That nerve root was then sending pain down his leg. We can't speed that up. Once we kind of remove that offending tissue and got things to start to calm down and what's called centralize the pain come up the leg, it's just going to take 6 to 8 weeks of consistent effort and time for that to kind of like put some scar down there and scar that thing down.
So for Khalid, he should be, would we want to, or incorporating some of this extra work, or would we want to modify his actual squats and the things that he is doing to be more of an eccentric load? So do we want to change everything to a more eccentric load in the squat pattern, or are we adding 2 to 3 weeks where we're doing some leg extensions, eccentric? Maybe we have him do like a goblet squat with a super slow eccentric.
Yeah, we may need to change some of the but it sounds like, Khalid, again, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you can do the squats. It's just that initially it hurts, but then after you kind of get warmed up, it goes away completely. So I don't know if I would change too much of the actual exercise. Probably just add a couple of things to it because he's able to get through it.
Okay.
Now, if the weight becomes an issue where it's just like it can't do because of the weight, then we could modify some things.
So a big thing for me is I play rugby, play volleyball, so a lot of my stuff has to do with like I didn't grow up playing sports, and so I feel like I don't have a lot of like the quick twitch, like especially like in some of like the like my lower back and like my hips. So I'm like working a lot of trying to like little things to get like my front hips to be really like flexible and explosive. And then I'm finding a lot of times like I just busted my face. And I think like part of that is like when I get tired, it dies out really quick. So like even in rugby, when I'm running, and I feel like it's usually top of my butt, lower back, where that's just so tight, or like my knees, everything kind of just compounds, and they're just like they don't necessarily ever give out fully, but I'm like these are stronger than what they're doing, and so I feel like energy is getting stuck somewhere, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's a little bit different than say, a straight up, pain or injury. It sounds like it's more of a fatigue of the muscles and the like an endurance type issue.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that definitely is a good way to look at it. And so then sometimes I'm having like a difficulty like strengthening those or getting that endurance up because they just die so quick, especially like for example, like blocking or jumping in volleyball, and then like changing direction or gaining momentum in rugby are ones that I'm like, my body, like my mind is there, but then half the time my body, which could just be repetition, or I guess are there ways I have a specific question. Are there ways that maybe, especially in like lower back, hip area, those muscle joints, I guess maybe distinguishing ways that I can better work on, or do I need to adapt to different things to strengthen those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Nick can probably help here on this one too, on the training side. But yeah, it sounds like it's more of a muscular endurance type issue since it's kind of new, or the sports are a little bit newer for you. Obviously, as we get older, it's a little bit harder for us to adapt to some of those movement patterns. But yeah, I would say the workouts that you are doing, if you have a specific kind of workout that you enjoy, incorporate some things outside of just pure like sagittal plane. We kind of get stuck in some sagittal plane movements every once in a while with barbell squats or or leg press, things that are very much in front of us this way. We want to start adding some frontal plane and some transverse plane, as well as some single leg or offset type things. So like Nick does a really good job of showing in his videos when you kind of see some of the single leg deadlifts, some offset type things, weight to one side, explosive things as far as twisting from low to high. But those things will come with just a little bit more time and training over time to get those muscles to adapt to that. Because yeah, once like our normal everyday activities of like, well, I walk forward, I sit in my desk, I do some things, they just don't have quite the amount of muscular endurance that is needed for high level things like rugby and volleyball.
So Joey, yours is like your low back gets fatigued, and then your hip flexors also fatigue out very quickly, is what you were saying?
Yes, so I feel like part of it is like the ability for like that spot like in the back where it's like hips, like it's definitely my hips, but it's like a deep tightness like in like upper butt, lower back. And so it definitely feels like hips. And so if it's just endurance, like working on those, the front hip flexors get like those are easier to work on, I guess. And I think I've seen a little bit of difference in those getting better, but yeah, they also get fatigued. It feels like everything gets bottled up like from my hips into like my knees. And so then it like changes form and things like that. But it was just endurance that also makes sense to just repetition and variability of building that endurance. But yeah, definitely like I feel like the lower back is definitely, I wouldn't say just say tight because that, you know, it can stretch however, you know, do all the movements or whatever, but there it does feel, it feels like it fatigues fast.
Can you sit for as long as you want to? Can you sit for hours if it doesn't bother you?
Absolutely not.
No, so sitting would bother you.
Yeah, like sitting for a long time, I usually just like prefer to stand.
Okay. So there still could be some directional type, you know, preference. I mean, it probably would be best to pick some of that tightness and some of that discomfort in the lower back. You know, to pick a direction, the easiest ones to start with would be either you know, flexion or extension. So flexion meaning like bending forward, or extension meaning like bending backwards. You know, if it's hard to sit and you don't like sitting and you rather prefer standing or moving around, then I would pick probably backwards or extension first, because sitting is kind of like flexion. So people that like to sit and can sit for hours tend to do better with, like, you know, forward bending or bringing your knees to your chest. Have you tried any kind of like stretches for the lower back or any kind of mobility things?
A little bit, and a lot of Nick stuff's really good for that too. Like I've definitely seen like changes and whatnot, and it's probably what's kind of like awakening something like, oh, being able to target specific things about that. Yeah, I would definitely say I spend most of my time, you know, in that like flexion. So getting, yeah. So I think that maybe it's like a balance thing too. Yeah, usually the stretches it a lot of times too, like, oh, we'll stretch this, do this, and again, even the stretch burns out quick at the time where it starts to cramp up or things like that. So yeah, I think finding that way to open it the opposite makes sense.
Yeah, pick an extension movement, whether it's extension and standing, so just kind of putting your hands behind your lower back and bending backwards, or like what Nick had to do. Just it's individual for him, but it might work for you too. Just to lay in your stomach, hands about, you know, shoulder chest height, really press high with the chest and shoulders, but leave your hips and stomach completely relaxed. Don't tension like your butt muscles or ab muscles. It's not a strengthening thing. It really wants to be very like passive and like sag down. That might be a good way to like start kind of as a warm-up type movement to get some mobility through the lumbar spine into extension, and then do it again after when you're done.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess, and then because these are things I've either like toyed with or like they make sense. Is there like a point in any of that where kind of like leaning into some of those where experiencing like pain or stiffness? Is there like a line that I should be wary of like leaning into it? Because I feel like that's why I usually cut it short sometimes too. Is like I don't want to do more harm than help.
Yes. So pain, like discomfort, in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's not a red light. We'll all
Okay.
have some kind of like stiffness pain. Now, the red lights or the red flags would be if that pain starts to, what I'd say or call peripheralize, or move like to one side, where it's like, oh, it's into my right buttock or into my right hamstring, or like what Nick felt when it went down his leg. That's a red flag. If the pain intensifies to the point where it's like it's just not tolerable. I mean, I just, you know, it's I can't sleep at night, I can't lay down, I can't get comfortable. That would be a red flag. But if it's just like, hey, it kind of hurts a little bit while I'm doing it, right? 4 or 5, like I had with Khalid, like, yeah, it's a 4 or a 5. Yeah. But when I stop, within seconds to minutes, a few minutes within like just resting, it calms down, it's no worse. Then that's not wrong. You can keep doing those kind of things as long as you have some kind of like movement or some kind of whether it's an exercise, a stretch, a movement that can quickly reduce it. Or another red light would be is if you lose mechanics where you're stuck. I can't bend forward, I can't bend backwards, like you're just like rigidly stuck, or you're stuck forward, like now I can't stand up straight. That would be a red light. But if it's just kind of sore to move, but you can still get through those motions, then no, you can still push through those.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, because I mean we all have pain at some. I mean, I'm 43. I wake up with pain every day. Like it's just part of the. I mean, but just having some stiffness and soreness is not a red light in and of itself. It has to be accompanied with some of those other, red light type factors, or I guess we'd be concerned about some of them other ones. But if it's like, no, actually, because you'd be surprised people that have a little bit of pain when they first start out, but like Khalid does, right? So if he quit after the first squat, he wouldn't have even realized that actually as I keep going, the pain goes away, it feels better. A lot of things kind of do need to warm up a little bit. Now yours is a little different. You feel good, I think, if I understand you right, feel good right away. and then it starts to get fatigued and you're losing your mechanics. What we don't want is that, as you lose your mechanics and form, I don't want you to get hurt because of that. Like you're not able to control your body in space. And that does sound like more of a, muscular type endurance issue as you get better and better and more into your activities.
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah, because I'm even like working on, like specific things for like blocking and hips and hitting and making sure. So even being aware of what I want my body to do is enlightening me to what my body is naturally doing. And so, yeah, that makes sense, kind of connecting those dots.
Great.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, Joey, we can you can message me after this. I can give you some stuff to help work on some of that muscular endurance too for those aspects.
Cool.
Awesome. Anyone else have some questions or some issues that maybe they're experiencing that they want some help with?
Or Nick, maybe talk about too, like some of the, training differences as it relates to, yes, we want to train at times for speed and power, which is different kind of training than, a longer term, muscular endurance type things or stability.
Yeah. So, I mean, because all of these members are going through our peak performance program. So it's kind of what we're doing in the beginning, like our first few phases, right? Where we're building more strength, there's more volume, and then we progress into the speed and power aspect later on. What could be happening for Joey, right, is we might need to just set a little bit more of a foundation for you before we really start to crank things up. Because I know that, we're doing some more box jumps and doing some more explosive movements in this training phase. So when you were saying that in my head is like, okay, maybe we need to shore up some of these other little qualities to get before we start to have you move into that.
Yep.
Oh, now I was just gonna, say like I'm kind of feeling the same, like especially on my landing. So like I can do anything, but like where the pain comes more specifically is in my landings. And yeah, but I mean, if you want to continue, I'll jump in when I get the opportunity.
No, you're good.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're doing a broad jump or something like that, you're experiencing the pain when you're landing.
Yeah. Well, like the skater jumps.
Okay.
A little bit, like it's a little bit easier on the, I guess unilateral movement. Landing with both feet. It's a little bit easier for me to land. But when I'm having to land on one leg or come off on one leg, especially like when we do like the warm ups and we do like the vertical jumps. The ankle pops is definitely one, just because, really throwing those feet in the ground in that bilateral movement is where I seem like that's where I have most of the issues. It's pretty easy to keep it intact when I'm landing with 2 feet and, I'm moving in that hemisphere of motion. But yeah, when I start to go bilateral, I find I have more problems. Like, and I know my gait is off and it's been something I'm working at. And, there's some deep hip muscles and those real tight abdomen muscles that, push the spine around, and they're just not always that active. Like, I fall when I walk. I fall and I catch myself as opposed to walking around. And I noticed that a bit in my movements. I'm not moving from like deep in my core. I seem to be catching myself as I walk as opposed to actually walking around or propelling myself.
So where are you feeling these pains at?
Low back and glute. And then up in my like right inside the scapula.
Oh, higher up.
On the right side. Yeah, it's a bit of both, because I had a pinched nerve when I was younger in my neck, never did the rehab, just got put in a little cast for some months. I've torn my ACL, and then I had a pretty bad IT band injury some years back when I was a little bit more stagnant. And yeah.
Well, that's some better information. Did you get your ACL repaired, or just is it still torn?
Yeah, I had the patella tendon graft.
Okay.
And yeah, so I went through I did rehab. I will say I didn't see it all the way through. But I made do, and I was still able to play and perform. But it wasn't really till years later, becoming more stagnant and working in the warehouse and catching injuries, that I kind of just really fell apart. And this program has helped a lot, especially more than anything, the mobility days. Like, I've had days during mobility. I know even the one arm when we're holding that band and we're staying tight here, like I've cried through them, like just feeling my lats re-engaged properly. Like being able, like feeling like my traps are reattaching at the top of my neck, and it lifts up my rib cage, and therefore I feel like better abdominal, like low abdominal contractions are holding things up, and then I can start to feel my hip flexors more. And I'm pretty good on things that I only have to do for like up to 5 seconds, but when I have to do anything longer than that, I feel like either my attention breaks, or I haven't been in those patterns long enough to stay in it, consciously longer than like a brief, 5 seconds or so.
So I'm gonna go back to something real quick. So like you're saying when you're doing some of the landings and the different jumps, you're experiencing pain in the Achilles?
Yeah. So I was experiencing Achilles. I would feel it. And normally it was kind of synonymous. Like if I felt it there, I was also feeling it on my glute and I was feeling it on my upper back. And the times that I got it right, I didn't feel it anywhere.
Okay.
Like came right when I activated right. When I had like a big, almost like how you brace your core when you squat, I was like doing the same thing with my movements. And when I was able to get it down, I didn't feel it, but it was far and few in between. I was like taking way longer than I would think I should have been on some of my lifts or movements on my lifts. But as we start doing those more functional movements or like the warm-ups for running.
Yeah,
like
so
it was becoming a workout more than it was just a warm-up.
for sure. And Chris, feel free to jump in whenever too. But with like what I'm hearing, it's essentially like those muscles that are requiring you to stabilize the hip and stabilize the body, like the ankle, knee, hip, all that stuff. When you are conscious of them, right, and you're like performing the movement well, you're turning those muscles on, nothing hurts. But it's when you maybe aren't as aware that of like actively trying to turn those muscles on to help you stabilize, that's when you start to get some of the pain that comes up through the body. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yep, that's what I'm hearing too.
Okay.
Like baby steps, it's like I can take baby steps, but when I start to run, like I fall down.
So, well, I don't know a good way to say this, but you're still a baby with those movements. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, don't progress them past what your body can handle right now. So the goal, eventually, like, it's good that you're feeling like, oh, no pain. That was awesome. It felt great. We just want you to continue to add a little volume of continuing to do those good quality reps. And over time, it's going to like, things are going to start to fire and wire the right way.
Yes.
So that you
it's neuromuscular. It's from the brain to the muscles first.
Yeah, I want to go.
Then it gets stronger later. But yeah, neuromuscular is always going to be the first thing that changes.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, I know we've chatted. You're a go-getter. You want to get it. You want to go 1,000 miles an hour, but you can't go 1,000 miles an hour with one of your wheels off the car. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
Right. So
yeah,
we got to reattach the wheel first, and we got to start cruising before we can pick it up. Because if we just go straight to 100 miles an hour, things are going to start to break down again, right? Things will start to hurt a little bit.
Mechanics aren't there.
Yep. So for you, yeah, even if it's like taking you a little bit longer, right? Like with some of these jumps, if you're not jumping as far, right? I don't care about any of that stuff.
Yeah, that's fine.
If you on those skater jumps, you need to jump. Like when I was rehabbing my ankle and trying to get my hip, like my glute med to fire and do some of these things, like I was jumping about 6 inches, right? Like and stabilize.
Like it turned into that yesterday.
Yeah,
I was like, man, I was doing it, and one side was okay, and then I was maybe like I don't know 4 yards or so was about to jump, and by the time I was done, I was just jumping over the line that was right there.
Yeah, so I'd rather you start smaller, stay there.
And focus and stabilize on the landing and hold it.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you're going to start to build those qualities even at that reduced rate. But over a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, now you're going to be able to put a little bit more force in those jumps, which is now going to require you to stabilize a little bit more and require those muscles and tendons to work a little bit more. But you're gradually progressing it up, right? Versus like these two felt great. I'm going to go here. Oh, can't handle that. I get some pain. So it's just a smaller approach that we need to take with the plyometrics and different movements. We just need to start at about 6 inches, do all your reps there for the week. Maybe next week, go to like 8, 12 inches, right? And it's a slow progression that way. Yeah.
And I felt the same, like, and so I guess it's kind of like, since it is in the workout that I'm on right now, in my mind, like I'm telling myself, like yesterday was speed day. and I didn't do speed day because I just already knew that it was, and this is probably the first time I've made that decision. Was I looked at the workout and I went and I kind of did what was on Wednesday's work because I just knew it was just going to be a painful day, and I was going to get what I needed out of the work. But the mobility work seems to, I just kind of, it frees me. It's the best way to say it. It seems to free me, but then the freeing parts are like, they haven't been moving well. So like that, especially my low abdomen, like I can feel it in there. Like my ability, to, not, have that posterior pelvic tilt as I'm bending over, right? To keep my hips underneath me as I'm moving, to keep my rib cage more upright, and allow that movement in my hips and my abs. Like I can feel it, like when we did the hip circle walks, absolutely loved it because I felt like I was able to start pushing my hips underneath me, spreading out, get those abductors working properly. And then I was able to maintain like a more upright body posture. And it was like but it was like my back had to be freed up. I had to run through that whole mobility drill again. The lower body one, and the upper body one, that all those thoracic movements, especially the overhead. And getting like even the tricep extensions doing overhead was freeing. Like I was able to like get my hands behind me. I wasn't experiencing little pops in my shoulders that I've been used to just pushing through. Yeah.
So for you, like, do that, right? Like, do the mobility, do all that stuff to open you up.
Yep.
Every day, damn near every day, right? Because we need to open you up to restore that range of motion, and then gradually add load and strengthen that back up. Then you're not going to really need to spend as much, like you're not going to get the clicking as much. Things are going to start working and moving properly. So yeah, like if the speed day or any of these things are like going to light you up and it's going to like cause you like significant pain, I would rather you spend that time going through and doing the mobility work that we have in there and just running through that again, right? And just like restoring and reopening yourself up with that. But yeah. Chris, was there anything that you heard that you want to touch on?
No, I mean, I think that stuff is exactly what it sounds like. That was perfect. The one thing that I would add for the scapular pain with having that, you've got some previous injuries and some previous mechanisms. So making all of those muscles fire in the right, sequence and having that stability, like Nick was saying, is important. Just stay with those and start from that base, and then we'll move up. But I would probably add a little bit of like probably upper thoracic or lower cervical extension for that scapular pain. So when you you've had a pinched nerve or an issue in the lower neck that maybe can kind of like go down, an arm, you'd really want to work on probably holding here and tucking the head straight back and then leaning like over the edge of a chair, or working on just pure retraction extension to get that upper up. Well, there's a transition between the upper thoracic and the lower cervical, and right in there is where almost all of those problems happen that give you like trap pain or like arm pain or like vertical, like the shoulder blade in your spine. It's right in between that vertical spot there. That's almost always in that spot. So just work through there.
Yeah, incredibly tight. Like you could touch it, like you could just put a little pressure on it and my whole body's gonna light up with goosebumps just because the amount of tension. It's there, and having that kind, even like I said, doing that overhead, like being in here, staying real tight in my core, and even doing that, and the overhead work we do over the foam roller,
where we're going,
holding it behind, it's just kind of like every bit of it took me to level.
Get that foam roller about mid shoulder blade kind of height, and then just really let the weight like mobilize it into extension. That should help that tightness through there.
Yeah, because we'll do one where we'll hold like a plate or something and go over a head. But I think what you're saying to do is to make sure he's tucking the chin back and then going back with the neck, because
how we spend a lot of time this way.
Yeah.
So go the opposite way.
Yeah. So just add that when we're doing those, right? And he's having me do some of these for my own shoulder it's happening, where I'm just literally tucking my chin back and going back as far as I can, because I'm a little bit tight all in that area too.
Yeah. Well, just surprising. There's easily 60% of shoulder pain, like any kind of like, shoulder arm tightness, like lifting up this way or to the side. if there's any kind of stuff going on there, it's very common that it's something underlying in that upper thoracic spine that we just didn't even know was there. It's just a kind of a preventative thing to try.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Is there anyone else that has any questions? Charlie?
Yeah, no questions. Just getting
Okay.
started with the program. I do have some historical pain in the my left hip. So left hip, lower back, and I know you guys covered a lot of that. With me, I try to do, I've been doing a ton of different exercises, and this is an old football injury, so we did a lot of power stuff, the deadlifts, the hang cleans, that kind of stuff. Where I've been, I'm 33 now, so little, a little bit older than those high school years. But where I find my hip hampering me is like pretty much guarding it, because there'll be times where it'll give, right? The knee will actually go, in, kind of collapse in, and then I'll have pain for a period of time. I stretch constantly throughout the day, like any given second. I'm literally trying to stretch it, whether I'm working, watching TV. So always just trying to manage it. So one of the reasons I got into this program, Nick, is because I did a lot of research on, just following you on Instagram, a number of different things, seeing what the mobility aspect was, the strengthening aspect was. So I was hoping that this program and this conversation, really just finding a way to better manage that, and then also be able to get back into my lifts the way I expect to be, right? Being able to not, have a question on my mind like, hey, is this the squat or the power clean or hang clean where my hip's going to do that thing that it does? And I lift by myself, right? So from a safety standpoint, like, is the bar going to fall on me? Is this weight going to fall on me? So I find myself almost limiting how much mentally I think I can go for it. I'm not trying to get PRs and stuff like that, right? Kind of past, trying to necessarily impress somebody with numbers, but I want to get more explosive, but I feel like I'm limiting the weight because of how it feels. So
Yeah,
it was looking to strengthen and just have that mobility back.
Okay. And then where you said the hip, is it like left hip, right hip, and then like is it front, lateral,
it's like,
back?
It's like posterior, like lower back, and then lateral, lateral hip. It's high though. I did actually seek some advice from a chiropractor. They said there was some alignment concerns. I haven't really been back. They had a few corrections that felt pretty good, but I don't want to live in a chiropractor's office to straighten things out. I want to do it the right way and kind of not accept, what was said at the beginning of the call, like, hey, this is something you're just gonna have to live with. If I can correct it myself and mainly strengthen it, I don't have any other, I don't have any other real nagging injuries or anything elsewhere besides that left hip. So that's kind of,
I mean, that's probably low back just based on the way you describe it. When you said your knee kind of gives in and like kind of dives in, do you feel like that's because the low back is hurting, or it's just like there's maybe a weakness in the hip that's causing the knee to kind of fall in? And then, if when you had the chiropractic adjustment, you felt like that was helpful to get like some treatment for at least for even temporarily?
It would be temporary. So to answer your first question, typically when it'll give, like I could be doing, say like a one-legged step down squat, right, with no weight, right, and there'll be times where I'll get a sharp pain, and then it just buckles in. So that'll happen on the hip side. From the corrective issues, or the corrections that I had through the chiropractor, that would last probably, I think the longest I got it to really, hold off the pain was probably a month. But then it was almost worse after I took that break from having the corrections. It's been okay, recently, and that was also, different time of year, like during the winter and things like that. It's been okay during the spring and summer, but I'm trying to correct it without having to go through chiropractors and adjustments and stuff like that. So.
Right. So the chiropractor, was it just a manual like adjustment and treatment in the office, or did they give you anything specific to work on at home between visits?
Not so much in terms of, like I already had a mobility routine, so I don't like stretching routine, so I didn't really get too many suggestions in terms of exercises or things like that. That's one of the reasons that I sought out Nick's program to get more of that
Yeah.
strengthening. But
Yeah,
they were just
that'll be very helpful. That'll be very helpful
Yeah.
because you need to have a plan, something in between the, the chiropractic. I mean, because my clinics have physical therapy and chiropractic combined because I do, it can be helpful. I mean, for a lot of people,
Sure.
it feels good to go, but without that plan in the in between visits, you're like, well, it only helps for a couple days and I got to go back again. So yeah, there's
correct.
something that you've probably done. I'm guessing the knee giving in is if the pain hits first and then that knee gives in, a low back and or hip pain, and Nick's felt this, we've all felt this, it can and definitely will inhibit the muscle function. So when you have a little bit of weakness in those the lateral hip, the glutes, the abductors, glute med, some of those external rotators, that's what will cause that knee to like cave in. That helps control your knee in space. But if it hurts, then it's going to like shut the signal off and your knee is going to cave in. Yeah, I'd probably pick a direction like, an extension in line to start with, just to see what happens. If not, maybe a flexion, or possibly a side glide, depending on, what's going on with that lower back. But that's where I'd get to the bottom of that one first.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
Oh, I said, can you like explain what a couple of those like things would look like for him to like I think you said side glide or flexion extension.
Yeah. So I'd start with extension first, because most of these things like that we experience happen within the sagittal plane. Sagittal just means we bend forward, we bend backwards. And that's typically where we feel most of our stuff. Sitting, rising, bending forward. So I would just pick like lying on your stomach, and the fact that he's been to a chiropractor, there is some kind of even temporary benefit already means that it's mechanical, because they're adjusting the joint. They're literally going in there and like putting pressure and force and speed through a joint to get a manipulation, which means it's something mechanical. Otherwise, it wouldn't be helpful. They'd be like, yeah, I don't feel anything. It just is the same all the time. The fact that it's that means that there's something you could do then at home to help keep that in that alignment or in that area. So yeah, I'd go face down, hands low, just like we talked about, I think with somebody else in here, maybe it was Joey. Yeah. Getting all the way up, elbow straight, chest high, head high, locking the elbows out, breathing out, let the stomach just sag. Sets of 10, and then retest that. The thing that I would do is use that. I think it's like a single leg, like stepping down, so eccentrically stepping back down off of a box. Use that as the concordant sign, as the thing that would go test. So we'd do maybe 30, 40 of those press ups, then go do that, step down again and see, hey, is it different? Can I now step down off of the box with little to no pain in that low back and hip? And if so, then we're on the right track. If it's worse, then you want to go the opposite direction. You want to go into knees to chest and flex, or you'd go if it's like, so this is my left side. So if the left side hurts, I'd want to close the left side down first. And so I would just be moving the hips to the side in a side glide. But I'd just stay with extension to start with, because that's the simplest way to test it.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And then do you feel like weakness in the glute med?
So yeah, I guess if it's weird because I've actually been experimenting with that, right? Like firing that muscle to almost protect it. But then it feels like I'm like, even when I'm walking, right? Like I almost feel like I'm guarding it or I'm protecting it with other muscles. So I don't think the glute, like if I'm doing like hip thrusters, stuff like that, like I can do that pretty well and pretty weighted. But I feel like I'm using those muscles to guard that left hip and maybe that lower back, if that makes sense, right? Where it almost, and then I feel like that compounds, I think somebody mentioned their gait before, right? Adjusting their gait. It's almost like I'm adjusting everything else around that to avoid that sharpshooting pain. And then I know that that's going to throw other things off, right? So I don't know that it's a glute issue, but that lower back and hip, just figuring out how to, strengthen and relieve that.
Okay. Chris, do you think it's some sciatica thing going on?
Yeah. So, I mean, anytime you feel that, it's totally natural to try to avoid. Nobody wants to bring on that pain. So you're gonna walk a little differently, or use, you're going to accommodate those movement patterns to not bring on that pain. And so part of the key is to fixing that is, understanding what's causing that pain and then fixing that. Then we should be able to get back to that. But like Nick and I were saying earlier, that kind of pain that you experience, it can and it will inhibit the muscle function. So when it hurts, the muscle, that signal just gets turned off, or it's at least greatly diminished. So you don't have the same ability to control the hip and the knee and the leg in space as you did if you weren't hurting. So get that pain under control first, figure that thing out, get you on the right movements. Then, as quickly as possible, as appropriately as possible, right back into the return to function exercises.
Sounds good. Yep.
Cool. Awesome. Does anyone else have any other questions pop up, or anything that they wanted to cover or go over? Is there anything that you wanted to cover or go over, Chris?
I think the main thing was that, it happens to all of us. It's very common. The trick, or it's not the trick, it's just knowledge and understanding that this is going to happen. It's typically not a red light. It's typically not, a situation where, hey, if my back hurts, I have to have surgery and I'm going to be out for months. These things, for the most part, the vast majority of back pain, even to one side, like back and leg, and even with Nick's, even a full on, disc bulge or herniation with nerve root irritation, the vast majority are fixable, are treatable without surgery. Only about maybe 3 to 4% of people that have those kind of injuries need surgery. So we're talking about 95 to 97% of people resolve this with given the correct movements. Now you got to get with the right person and have the right either coach or clinician to help you through it. But the vast majority are fixable conservatively. The scary part of the fear comes in when I have this pain and it hurts to do it. I start to feel better. I don't want to do anything that will turn me backwards or bring that pain back on again. And that's where a lot of people get kind of stuck in that. Well, I don't want to make it worse. So our natural instinct, and it's just human. If I don't know what to do, I'll just choose to do nothing because I don't want to make the wrong decision. And then by doing nothing and just, letting ourselves rest or not re-getting into those movement patterns and integrating back into strength training, we also know will not long-term help us, right? So we don't want to just be completely inactive because of this pain. We have to find the right movement patterns and get that thing fixed, and then as quickly as possible get into the return to function exercises. So yeah, I think the thing that just wanted to cover, at the end here briefly, is that it's very common. If you have it, I understand it's painful. It's the thing that I deal with the most, but it's not, it's more than likely not a surgical type thing. It's not going to be very serious. It's going to be something that's fixable with the correct movements and treatment.
Cool. Do you want to let them know where they can find you, get in contact with you, or anything like that? Like your Instagram or anything, if they want.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, if anybody has any questions, I will absolutely, hop on a call with you, or we can message back and forth. It's at the Herniated Disc Expert. Same thing on I think on YouTube channel. My website for the clinic is one other way. I mean, my email is my first name, Chris. It's Chris at ehsptchiro.com. And I'm open to any questions, or if anybody needs any help with anything. This is like Nick takes us on as well as I do. This is really our mission and passion, is helping people achieve these kind of goals. I mean, it bothers me and it bothers Nick greatly that people get told the wrong information, not only in like training and their fitness, but also like on my side, on the medical side. Giving the wrong exercises, the wrong directions, the wrong advice of, I'll just take more pills, get some injections, just rest, don't do anything. It just, I've done it for many years now, and it's something that I really feel passionate about, helping people get the right care and the right movements that they need to get back to fitness. And Nick's, I truly believe that the stronger and more fit that we are through life is the one thing that will keep us alive longer, and be able to do and have a more fulfilling life, as opposed to being skinny, being like, I don't care about that. I want to be strong. I want to be able to keep all of my muscle mass as much as possible as I get older, so that I can be as functional as possible.
100%. Cool, man. Again, I appreciate your time.